Limbo Lodge by Joan Aiken, Chapter 4. They rode until dusk through hot, sleepy forest. The island, Dido learned from her companion, was like a great wedge tipped upward toward the south. Mount Furra was the highest, southernmost point, and not far below the highest peak was that of King John's royal residence, Limbo Lodge. "Why is it called that? That's a funny name," said Dido. "Well, I don't know, Shaggy Missy. Old sovereign king would have it so after wifey die. That's where he mostly stay. Would come to Regina town no more. Too sad, see, and throw his girl child off cliff in of death in clay pot." Dido's blood ran chill. "Why did he do that?" she demanded when she got her breath back. "Too much she make him remember wifey." "Seems bad luck on the girl child." "Ah, well, see, Shucky Miss. Outros people not want girl children. Not at all, no value." "Is that why gals have to wrap up their heads?" He nodded. "In town, hate gal. Among us forest people, most different. For us, girl child bring good luck. When she grow, she be kaniki." "What's that?" From Tylo's explanation, Dido learned that among the forest people who did not live in settled villages but kept moving around, the men or hamahi, guides or record keepers, while the women became kaniki, witches, and dealt with the practical affairs of life. "How do the men keep records?" You soon see, when you see my Sistigna." "So the town people, the Angrians, hate gals and the forest people love them?" Is so. "And the civil guard, the town people?" "Is so, golly likely." Krupus, thought Dido. I hope Doc Talisman keeps fooling those guards that she's a boy. But she didn't fool Tylo. That's rum. "What happened at the jail, Tylo? Did you see Dr. Talisman? Did you give her my message?" He laughed. "No, I not see, but she, Doc Talisman, top high Kaniki. She soon be out of that place. Those guards, fright scared of that shaggy lady. She got mighty strong pneuma." "What's pneuma, Tylo?" A kind of magical power pneuma seemed to be, Dido gathered from his explanations. She was somewhat startled, then remembered Talisman's amazing feat of lifting the heavy marble basin full of water. Could something like that have happened at the jail? Dido and Tylo had long since left the orderly plantations and were now making their way through true forest, the vegetation packed and juicy around them, creepers and ferns solidly filling up the spaces between the big trees, which towered high above their crowns, and the sky itself, out of sight above dense foliage. Even the birds and monkeys sounded far away, hundreds of feet overhead, and the path snaked its way through the silent green twilight. Dido supposed there was a path. Tylo seemed quite certain of where he was going and kept on at a steady pace. Then Dido began to notice a small white bird with a pink tail and a crest which from time to time, perched on a bough above them, chattered out a short shrill song, then flew on ahead. Sometimes it lit on the brow band of Tylo's horse. "Is that the same bird each time?" "Is so, Shucky Miss. Memory bird. You tie knot in rope, throw rope in water, memory birds stay with you when you want." The memory birds, Dido learned. Each had their own zone. All Aratu was divided into memory bird zones. I wish I could get hold of a memory bird, Dido thought. They sound right useful. Not that there was any shortage of other birds at this point, but they were mostly out of sight. The trees in the spice plantations had been bustling with gaudily colored parrots and parakeets, and no doubt they were here too, but high up, invisible. Once or twice, Dido, with a thumping heart, noticed a huge snake twining in among the branches, but there did not seem to be any pearl snakes in the forest. "Pearl snake he stay near sea, near Nutmeg Grove," Tylo confirmed. "Only tree snake in forest." "I don't know as I like these any better," said Dido, regarding a 12-foot specimen winding its muscular way up a vertical tree trunk. "You leave him alone, he'll leave you." "I'll do that." Presently, Tylo's memory bird changed its call. Instead of the short song, it let out sharp warning shrieks. Rain comes soon. Best we find shelter place for sleep night, said Tylo. I'd have thought these trees would shelter us. Oh no, Shaki miss. Best we find a wocho. A wocho, Dido learned, was a house where forest people had lived, but moved away. Soon, Tylo found a clearing with 2 huts which consisted of thatched roofs on legs. No walls? What need? To keep out snakes? Tylo explained that if you said the proper charm before going to sleep, no snake would trouble you. The wocho roofs sloped down to deep overhanging eaves. One house had an earth floor, the other a kind of deck, knee-high above the ground, made from palm fiber, laid across joists. Ponies in there, said Tylo, and tied them up in the first wocho with an armful of fodder apiece. Now we go sit here on deck, and he gave a poke to dislodge any ants or scorpions that might be lodging among the fiber. They had not been any too soon in taking shelter. The memory bird was entirely correct in its forecast. The air turned gray, the forest gave a loud moan, then the trees at the edge of the clearing vanished from view. A thunderous noise, a mixture of rattle and roar, swallowed up the whole world, and the ground outside the hut looked like a battlefield, with water pouring down and water leaping up, bouncing off the dry earth. Mercy, thought Dido. How can anything stay alive under that deluge? It's a mighty good thing we're here and not out there. She turned to say this to Tylo, but realized that he could not possibly hear her. It was like trying to make herself heard through the yelling, shouting, and screaming of a huge multitude. Every now and then, there came a flash of lightning across the gloom. Too bad we didn't take out the grub from the saddlebags, Dido thought. We could have had us a picnic, but I wouldn't venture out in that downpour. Even to the other hut, it'd flatten you like a pastry. The rain cascaded down the stout leaf roof above them and poured off the eaves in a solid sheet. It's like windows made of water, Dido thought. The storm raged all night, then stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The forest was sodden and dripping, and because the drenched foliage hung straight down, a good deal lighter, patches of sky were visible. The birds in the treetops were shrieking joyfully as if astonished at being still alive. We late now. We eat as we ride, Tylo said, and gave Dido a hunk of cornbread with figs stuffed into the middle. They rode fast, munching through the forest, which now became thinner and more open, giving way to dispersed groves, then to shrubby savanna land. Descending into a valley, they saw a larger grove of taller trees ahead of them. The memory bird, satisfied, let out a broadside of chirrups, then flew fast and disappeared among the trees. My Sisinga's now place, said Tylo. The sun in the east was dazzling. Sparks and flashes of light tossed and flickered from every wet surface, but Dido, peering ahead, could see 2 large dwelling huts in the middle of the shady grove, and she thought figures seated in front of them. What's your great-grandfather's name? She asked. Name he known by is Asun, but the real name known only to him. I see, said Dido, though she did not quite. Still, she thought, if he wants to keep his moniker to himself, I reckon that's his business. Is the other cove sitting with him? Is that Lord Herodsfoot? Tylo gave a chuckle. That always seemed to follow when he thought of his lordship. My lord Ocklosh. Yes, that him. Well, thank goodness for that, thought Dido. At least there's one thing that's worked out to order. It had not quite worked out, though, for as they entered the grove, Dido heard a piteous wail from overhead somewhere to their right. Visibility was less dazzling now. They were in the shade of the grove. She scanned the dusky foliage high above them and caught sight of a small somebody at the end of a leafy branch, who called out frantically, I, help me, please. Was it a monkey? No, it was about the size of one, but human and absolutely petrified with terror. Oh, Tylo, what shall we do? What can we do? Gliding up the tree, twining round and round the trunk with formidable strength and speed, was one of the large snakes they had glimpsed as they rode through the forest. "Can we pull it down by the tail?" cried Dido, sliding off her mount. "No, no, Shocky Miss. He strangle you at once dead. Shock, shock, quick!" Dido did not waste time asking any more questions. She acted. Far away, long ago, in the streets of Battersea, London, she had more than held her own against mobs of enemies wielding bottles and brickbats. Now she snatched up a hefty stone from the ground and hurled it with certain aim and ferocious force. The stone struck the snake's head, and a shudder passed through all its shining spiraled length. Grabbing another stone, Dido flung it with equal fury. The snake loosed its hold of the tree trunk and fell to the ground in a twist of writhing coils. When Dido let fly with a third stone, the snake waited no longer but made off, discouraged and affronted, seeking for easier pickings. "My word, Shocky Missy," said Tylo, hugely impressed. "You #1 thrower." Without answering, Dido went up the tree. A mere tree was to her a simple matter, due to all the time she had spent in the rigging, first of a Nantucket whaler, then of HMS Thrush. "Don't you be scared, I'm a-comin'," she called. A faint whimper was the only reply. The tiny girl she had come to rescue was huddled in a cluster of shorter branches at the end of a long, upward-pointing bough. Now the cause for her venturing up so high was also visible, bunches of light red fruit about the size of grapes or cherries. Her face and hands were splattered with their juice, and she had a large grass-fiber bag, half full of berries. "Hang on, little un, that's the ticket," Dido said encouragingly. The small girl gave her an amazed look, half alarmed, half trusting, but after a moment or two allowed herself to be helped down from the branch and back to the main trunk of the tree. Here she regained all her own tree-climbing confidence and slid nimbly down to the foot of the trunk, where Tylo was dancing up and down. "Yorka, Yorka, wicked child! Ahash! Oho! Tuhuli!" Dido understood that he was giving her a terrific scold in the Delindi language, but that she was defending herself vigorously. What was she to do? What was she to do? With the two old gentlemen so busy and no breakfast meal ready for them, when they would have finished their sacred business, and Uncle Desi away catching fish in the river, of course she had to pick some Djila fruit. "Oh, are those Djila fruit?" inquired Dido. "I thought no one was allowed to grow Djila trees except King John." Tylo gave her a quick glance, both embarrassed and reproving. "Never mind that for now, Shocky Miss. I explain you later. Yorka tells my Sisingana, singing Lord Aucklesh. World-beginning mystery song. Very long song. Must sing sunrise to sunrise. Cannot stop song till finish. Lord Aucklesh putting song into word paper speak. Must wait till finish. Near done now." "Massy me," said Dido. "A song that lasts 24 hours. Now, indeed, coming closer, they could hear the Sisingana, who sat in front of his house, partly chanting, partly telling a long saga. Dido caught a word here and a word there about the living world, the great cloud beast mother that carries us on her back, the moon and the sun, her sisters, the shadow people who live underground, how they were all born, where they are all going. To tell this story truly would take 100,000 tree times, and our own island, Aratu, is the center of the whole mystery, the heart of the cloud beast mother. In the center of our island is the 12 ghost stones. 9 are already fallen. When the last 3 fall, then comes the dark, after which there will be no sunrise. The Sisingana's strong vibrating voice began to slow down, then came to a stop. An insect like an outsized cricket emerged from his great mass of silvery beard and chirped huskily, lustily. "Is it finished?" said Dido. "It is finished," said Tylo. "Long legs clock if I say so." The Sisingana had a broad, brown, benevolent face, and the blackest, deepest eyes that Dido had ever seen. He wore a cloak of silvery pale, the Djila flowers, which were hooked at the end of the petals, so they clung together. He had been sitting cross-legged while giving his lengthy recitation, but now he stood up and stretched. His movement reminded Dido of Talisman. She noticed that his hair and beard were soaking from the storm. He must have been sitting out here telling his story through all that downpour. Dido turned to look at the other old gentleman and received a shock. Somehow she had always assumed that Lord Herodsfoot was elderly, from what she had been told of him and the things he chose to do. Would you expect a young person to wander all over the world looking for roses and dice games and grasshoppers? Hardly. But Lord Herodsfoot was indeed quite young, about the same age as Lieutenant Windward of the Thrush. Dido reckoned, and Lieutenant Windward was only 35. Herodsfoot had a thin, pale, acute face and fair, fuzzy hair so pale it was almost white, which was why the child Yorka had mistaken him for an old gentleman. Also, he wore tortoiseshell glasses perched on the end of his nose, which made him look serious, and he had been frantically scribbling in a small, thick notebook all the time, and the Sisingana was chanting his tale of the world. Herodsfoot, like the Sisingana, was completely drenched, clothes, face, and boots, but he had managed to keep his notebook dry by pulling a huge green waterproof leaf over his head and shoulders and protecting the notebook under its folds. "Why the plague didn't they go indoors?" Dido asked Tylo later. "Oh, my Sisingana would never allow an Oteros person into his house." "Why?" "Infection, not body germs, soul infection. Only have Shocky Lord sit outside there. Sisingana will have to wave feathers 4 days to drive away soul sickness." And indeed, all the time that Dido was in the forest, she never set foot inside a forest person's house, unless the owners had already left, as when they sheltered from the storm in the deserted Wocho. Now Dido approached Lord Herodsfoot, who was carefully studying his notebook to make sure that the rain had not blotted any of the writing in it. Of his soaked clothes he seemed oblivious. Dido noticed that what he had put down in his notebook was not ordinary writing, but pothooks, some kind of shorthand. Well, I think I have it all," he said, addressing Dido as if she were an old acquaintance. "It was a great piece of luck that you did not arrive any sooner." He had not shaved for a couple of days. His face was covered with pale stubble, so that, with his damp, pale hair, he looked like a wet dandelion clock. "Lord Herodsfoot, you're wanted back in London in a hurry. I'm sent to tell you." "Oh, good heavens, why now?" Lord Herodsfoot rubbed his damp head. He had a wide, lively mouth. When he smiled, it seemed to extend right across his face from ear to ear. His smile was very friendly. "King Jamie wants you badly. We got a message at Tenby," said Dido, feeling somewhat aggrieved at this matter-of-fact reception, as she thought of what a long distance and long time she had been traveling in search of this man. King Jamie is mighty poorly. Captain Hughes of the Thrush is waiting at Amboyna to fetch ye back to London town." "Oh, bother King Jamie. Is he really sick or just bored?" "That I couldn't tell you, not having the pleasure of His Majesty's acquaintance." "Do you think I rarely have to go?" Herodsfoot asked, as seriously as if Dido were the Prime Minister. If King Jamie himself wants you, maybe you could go by the Northwest Passage. That might be faster," Dido was beginning, when the little girl, Yorka, came to them with a large bunch of feathers. Her aim was to indicate to them politely that they should move a bit farther away from the Sisingana's hut, into which he had retired and was now taking a much-needed nap. The uncle, another broad-faced, smiling man, had returned from his fishing excursion, evidently a successful one, for he had a basket of what looked like large river trout. He and Tylo were lighting a fire, blowing on a piece of tree fungus, which slowly became incandescent. The fire was not laid on the bare ground, but contained inside a hearth made of piled-up stones with a knee-high curb around it to prevent sparks from flying out. When Dido asked about this, Tylo explained that the soil of Aratu was very combustible, being mostly peat. Once or twice in the island's history, there had been disastrous fires, and the forest people were afraid that if a fire ever got out of control, the whole island might burn up. Like what happened to Mount Zimbo, that one island, like this one, many a tree length from here, far toward, like what happened on Mount Zimbo. That once island like this one, many tree length from here, far towards place of cold white sea, and it burned up and all the people died. So now always we keep fire in firebox. The roasted fish were accompanied by roots dug from the ground, beans, delicious bark bread, sandwiched with peppery leaves, and the degila fruit, which were the best food Dido had ever tasted. No wonder King John wants to keep them for himself. While they ate, Lord Herodsfoot told Dido more of the history of Aratu, about which he seemed to be very well informed. The Angrians came here from Europe about 400 years ago. That was a time when a lot of European countries were grabbing other people's lands. The Angrians took over, driving the forest people into the middle of the island, and they built their port, Regina, and planted spice plantations. The pepper trees were here already, but they brought nutmeg and cloves and many others. But then the forest people very slowly, very powerfully began to fight back. How did they do that? Oh, they began casting spells to make the Angrians homesick. One of them went, "Spirit of our grandmother, Aratu land, make the incomers mourn for their own place. Make them sad in their hands and feet, their eyes, their mouths, their private parts. Stab them in their thoughts. Trouble them east, west, south, and north. Make their stomachs long for their own fruit, own fish. Oh, make them get in a ship and sail far away to Angria, to their own home, to their own home." And did the spell work? It did indeed. In the course of the last 100 years, nearly all of the Angrians migrated and went back to Angria, or to South America, and the ones who stayed behind have grown very sad and peculiar. "They hate girls, don't they?" Dido said, remembering what Tylo had told her. "Yes, and they hate sport and anything cheerful, because of the spell. They have become very glum and puritanical. They used to be fond of playing games, but now they think that is sinful. They disapprove of me because I am looking for ancient games for King Jamie. They look down on any sort of amusement." "Soon they all go," said Tylo hopefully. "By and by golly." In spite of this disapproval, Herodsfoot went on, many of the Angrian men are addicted gamblers. Cards, dice, any form of betting they can't resist. But tell about King John. Why did the Angrians let him come and take charge here? He was English, wasn't he? He very strong mind, said Tylo. King came to this island when he was about 20 years old, Herodsfoot said. He had his younger brother, Paul, who was 16, and a pocket full of degila seeds. No one ever learned where he got those. The convict ship from which he escaped had stopped at various ports. King started growing degila trees and trading spices in a small way, but soon grew rich. And by the time the forest people's curse was affecting the Angrian settlers very strongly, so they were devilish, and by that time the forest people's curse was affecting the Angrian settlers very strongly, so they were devilish down in the dumps, and glad to have King take over the running of the island, which he did very capably. He adopted an island girl whose parents had died of snakebite and called her Arato, and had her sent to school and taught music. Then he married her. She had a very beautiful singing voice, I'm told. Like sunrise bird, said Tylo, nodding. You heard her? No, you couldn't have. She died 20 years ago. My father hear her, gardener to sovereign king, lived those days in Asgard Hall, now House of Correction. When Erato died, old sovereign John moved to Mount Fura and threw his baby off the cliff of death. No, suddenly put in Uncle Desi, who up to now had remained silent, munching his bark bread. Not sovereign John, his brother Paul threw baby. How do you know that? Asked Lord Herodsfoot, very interested. His glasses slipped off his nose, and he shoved them back. by one earpiece, causing little Yorka to let out a shriek of wrath. No, no, not do so. You break again. No more tinsel stock. I'm terribly sorry, Yorka. I'm terribly sorry, Yorka. She has to mend my glasses half a dozen times while the old boy was singing his story, explained Herodsfoot guiltily. It was so very exciting. My father's sister see Paul throw baby. She picking sing plums up sing plum tree. See Paul King put Jane child in clay pot. Throw off mountain. Time of the onda. That's the title ball that comes past every time Mount Zimbo erupts, explained Lord Herodsfoot. But this is very interesting. If King Paul really did throw his niece into the sea, it gives one a quite different notion about him. If Paul King really did throw his niece into the sea, it gives one a quite different impression about him. He has changed his name to Manuel, by the way, he explained to Dido. Manuel is an Angrian name. He is friendly with the Angrians and wishes for their approval. I used to get on tolerably well with the fellow, but throwing his niece off the cliff, no. Really, one can't countenance a thing like that. But Lord Herodsfoot, said Dido, puzzled. Oh, do call me Frank. My name's Algernon Francis Sebastian Fortinbras Cosluthith, but my friends call me Frank. Frankie, then. Thanks, mine's Dido. But in the town, when we saw him, Manuel didn't even know you. Act as if he's not met you. Oh, that's because in the days when I knew him, I hadn't come into the title yet. I was just Honourable Algernon Carsluith when I used to come across Paul King in gambling towns like Bad Somsburg. Of course, I was doing research then for my doctorate degree in loaded dice. Oh, now I get you. He don't know it's you. Did you come across Doc Talisman too? Herodsfoot had only a vague recollection of a Dutchman, Van Lind, who upset the casino managers by his phenomenal luck. He did not remember a little girl. Maybe she was a boy then, Dido thought. Maybe she always dressed as a boy to get inside gambling halls, or because it made travel easier. But why would Manuel throw the baby girl into the sea? Maybe like the Angrians, he hates girls. But Uncle Desi said no, it was because if the girl baby were out of the way, then when King John died, his brother Manuel would take over his position as ruler of the island. Oh, that is what he hope. Maybe soon he throw his brother off cliff of death. Or hope Outros people do so. For now, Sovereign John don't give his brother no more money for travel. He can't go away, must stay here on Aratu. Dido found this story extremely interesting. 20-odd years ago, Dr. Talisman had fallen off a cliff, had been rescued by a trading ship, taken halfway across the world, and brought up in Europe. It's a rare thing, thought Dido, that if Doc Tally is King John's daughter, and a story does seem to fit into that one like a foot into a shoe, it's a mighty havey-cavey thing that the very cove, her own uncle, who chucked her off the cliff, should meet up with her years later in a gambling town in Hanover. Or is it so havey-cavey? Was he looking for her? Does it all hang together? Suppose Brother Paul, or let's call him Manuel if he's changed his moniker to that because it sounds more Angrian and he wants to be all pals with them. Suppose Manuel, after he chucked the kid into the sea, suppose he heard tell about the Dutch vessel sailing by that picked up the young'un. Suppose he goes to Holland and hears of a girl kid being rescued by this Van Lind. We know that in those days Manuel made a plenty trips to Europe gambling. Where did he get the dibs to gamble? Well, Brother John was doing right well from all those Dagila trees. Maybe he got the mint sauce from generous Brother John. But then Brother John clams up. Manuel has to stop home, but he'd met young Tally at one of those gaming places, and given her the notion of coming back to Aratu to make a gander at the place she came from. Now, why does Manuel do that? Why does he want her back here? Right from the start, I reckon that Manuel would bear watching, Dido thought. In my book, he's as twisty as a corkscrew. He knows that Talia's old sovereign King John's daughter. What's he planning? Frankie, she said urgently, we must hurry us back to Regina Town. At this moment, Olvasun, the ancient Sisangana, woke up from his brief nap and came rolling impressively out of his wojo. I hear the drums, he said. They send a message. He spoke in the Dalindi language, but Dido was by now beginning to pick up a fair number of words. Drums? She was puzzled. I don't hear no drums, Your Honor. Yorka, now the meal was finished, had come to sit, leaning comfortably up against Dido, in order to teach her a game played with 4 blades of grass and 2 snail shells. Great-great-grandpa can hear drums when no one else can, she explained. Drums, repeated Asun. Drums tell me 2 things. That clever Otros lady has escaped from the House of Correction. Oh, bully for Doc Talisman, cried Dido joyfully. We might have guessed they'd never keep her buckled up for long. But I wonder where she's heading. I hope she'll come this way. She knew I was under orders to look for Lord Frankie. And she'd not want to stay in the town in case there was trouble about Mr. Mully. Unless she'd go back to the ship. No, said Asun. For the second drum message relates to the ship. The city guards have taken the ship. Taken the ship? Why in Mussy's name? Asun waited a few moments, listening to inaudible messages. Is so often, replied Yorka. We hear drums from all over. Who does the drumming? Other Hamahai all over forest. Like the memory birds, thought Dido. A network of drum messages all over the island, heard only by some. Pretty smart, that. Those Angrian coves had things really stacked against them when they tried to take over this place. Asun was ready to speak again. City guards took ship because the Gilapods found in cargo hold, but captain said he never put them there, very angry, said it was a plot, a trap, guards take no notice, unload his cargo. Why do that? They want ship, take out to sea, make for Manatee Harbor. So Captain Sanderson's cargo was just left lying on the dock. He won't be best pleased about that. What was the cargo? Lord Herridsfoot inquired. Tea, sugar. Dido thought of the savage rain last night beating down on the sacks of sugar on chests of tea. Where is Cap Sanderson? Gone to ask audience of leader King John. Said Herridsfoot. He'll be uncommonly lucky. By what I hear, if he gets to see the king on his mountain top, not even his brother gets to see him these days, if what I'm told is true. Poor Cap. He'll be really wild, said Dido. First, having some scallywag plant a load of Dagilapods on him. He'd never be such a jackass as to take those on board. And second, having his ship pinched. That's the limit. I lay it'll be a while before he comes to Aratu again. But in the meantime, said Herridsfoot, sliding his glasses up his nose and evoking a warning shriek from Yorka. In the meantime, it somewhat lessens our chances of getting off the island, in the near future at least. Yes, that's so, agreed Dido, pondering. Tylo, what had we better do? It's late in the day now to go back to Regina Town. And if we did go back, what's the point? There's no ship and no captain. And the town guards may be waiting to collar me too, she thought, for helping Doc Tally with the operation. Croupice, poor Mr. Multiple in the hospital. I just hope he's coming along as he ought. But they are taking good care of him. After all, none of this is his fault, Tylo considered. Might be better try to go see old Sovereign John King. He sounded rather pleased at the prospect. Have you ever seen him, Tylo? He shook his curly head. Only across River Gorge. He's sitting garden of Limbo Palace. Very old man, white hair, and hard to make hear voices. That I know. King is very deaf, confirmed Herodsfoot. I heard that too. All his personal staff are issued with notebooks. They have to write down in their books anything they want to tell King or ask him. Tough luck if you can't write or can't spell. It was a lucky thing for King John, Dido thought, that his deafness had come on after his wife Erato died. If it was her singing voice that he so specially loved, would have been hard on him if he grew so deaf he couldn't hear her sing. What did she die of, King's wife? She asked Tylo. Snake bite? Too many snakes on this island. You'd think he'd want to leave after that. Rich here, Tylo pointed out. The Gila nuts. And Quoll. What's Quoll? He made gestures with his fingers. What shocky missus likes to wear round neck. He pointed to little Yorka, who had a necklace of shiny brown nutshells. They hardly seemed worth braving snakes for. How long will it take to get to this Limbo Palace? 2 nights in forest. Best we start chop now. And Sisingana needs peace. You agreeable to that, Lord Harriet Frankie? He sighed. While grieved indeed to terminate my pleasant visit with the venerable Assoon, who had promised to teach me the game of king and crocodiles, which sounds to me remarkably like the ancient Saxon game of Nettifafel, I believe we had best set out with no delay. Assoon did mention that we were in for a spell of unchancy weather. Unchancy, if that means a shower like the one last night, little Yorka, jumping up and down, squeaked. I can teach the shocky Lord King and Crocodile. Oh, I can teach. Can you, my dear? Said Lord Herodsfoot, looking down at her kindly. But you would not want to take a long wet trip through the forest, would you? But you would not like to take a long wet trip through the forest, would you? Not? Why not? The forest was where Yorka lived, she pointed out. It was her home. Well, let her come, said Tylo. She can help me find the way to Quinquilho Ranch, where we spend our first night. Belong to Angrian family. Iriah. Will the Iriahs want us staying with them? No, said Tylo, but must give bed to traveller. They have strict rules about hospitality, Herodsfoot agreed. So they set off without delay. Herodsfoot had another guide, a boy called Senu, to lead him to the grove where Assoon at present chose to live. Since his services were no longer required, Senu declared his intention of going off to the Kalara place for a cleansing and loped away at once up the side of the valley. The others mounted their fed and rested mounts. Herodsfoot had a little flea-bitten gray pony, and Yorka rode in front of Dido, though she said proudly that on foot she could keep up with any 4-footed beast. Still, no need to walk when you can ride, said Dido. Where are your mother and father, little un? Her mother was dead, Yorka explained, fallen from a tree when a rotten bough broke under her. Her father, a Hamahai message sender and record keeper, was somewhere in the forest. She saw him now and then, but spent more time with her aunts and with her great-grandfather Assoon. She turned around to call the old man a last goodbye, but he was busy waving infection away from his door with a bunch of feathers and did not heed her. He will do that 4 days now. What's that cleaning place where Senu's gone? The place of the stones, the 12 great stones that our Sisingana spoke of in his story. 9 are fallen, 3 still stand, Dido explained. We go there to be made clean of trouble or curse. Dear me, said Lord Herodsfoot eagerly, pushing up his glasses, at which Yorka gave a warning growl. I should dearly like to see that place. There is a game called 12 Stones played by the Twee people. Well, said Tylo, we sleep tonight at Quinquilho Ranch. We could perhaps cross Honey River tomorrow by the ford and pass Place of Stones. Splendid! Splendid! Do you know the history of the place? It is very old, very old, many thousand tree time. Stones come from who knows where, not island stone, who knows how. Too heavy for men to lift. Under every stone a man's head bone buried. A skull is so, but one head bone gone. Who took it? No one know. Nor could they find out from Tylo exactly when the skull had been taken. Some 3 time back was all he could tell them. People did not often visit Kalara, the Place of Stones, because unless you had a real need of cleansing, the place was likely to send you away loaded with more trouble than you had brought with you. The place discouraged casual visitors. Some say, why not all old Sovereign John go for cure from hearing sickness? Well, said Dido, why don't he? Maybe stones don't help him. He not island man. He would have to believe in them, said Herodsfoot thoughtfully. But if he married an island girl, he must have shared some of her beliefs. All the way along as they rode, Yorka was telling Dido about the plants in the forests. Not one single tree in the whole forest, but happy to help us. See those berries make wash paste. This creeper just right to weave bags. That tree make table or stool. The fruit very good for flavor meat when you cook. These leaves keep you dry when rain come. In exchange for this information, Dido told Yorka about the streets of Battersea, London, where she had grown up. The beggars, thieves, cutthroats, lords and ladies in their carriages, market stalls selling food, household goods and toys, the street singers and jugglers. Yorka was polite and interested, but she made it plain she thought that Battersea sounded like a dreadful place, where you had to pay for food. Wouldn't you like to travel and see other places besides Aratu, Yorka? No, I wholly love our forest. Don't want anywhere but here. Yorka had not even been as far as Regina Town, and had no particular wish to do so. She said it sounded like a dismal place, full of bad-tempered people. Tell about this Quinquilho place where we're going. And none too soon either, thought Dido, for though they were now back in the true forest and could not see the sky above them, even the dim tree light was dwindling fast, and ominous growls of thunder and flashes of lightning every now and then made the horses start and whinny. Quinquillo Notawoho, house built by Otero's people 10 tree times back. Yorka pushed her lip out disdainfully. Dido gathered that she, personally, would prefer to spend the night in the forest rather than lodge under a stone roof with this gloomy Angrian family. They got nowhere they want, nothing to do. Dido pondered. What do folk want? Frankie Herodsfoot there. He wants to find more and more games, and plants and stories. Doc Talisman wants to cure sickness. Captain Sanderson wants to sail his ship. What do I want? I want to go back to Battersea and find my friend Simon and see what's happened in London town. What do you want, Yorka? Be a Kaniki, like my mother's sister. Aunt Tala'a. What do Kaniki do? Magic, good magic, said Yorka firmly. Bring rain, make fish grow big in river, send away the drought woman. Sing whispering song, melt trouble fire, write name in sand, keep away, never weak. You can learn to do all that. By and by in tree time. Now, said Yorka, here we come, Quinquillo. Iriara family. Don Enrique, Donna Esperanza, hear dogs bark. Her quick ears had caught the sound far away. The dog sounded very savage. Hope they're tied up, said Dido. Dog won't ever bite a naked person, you know that. Well, said Dido, I don't aim to take off my breeches and jacket just to find out if that's the true tale. It's too cold by half, anyhows. The temperature had shot down. Now the travelers were out of the forest, in a large cleared space of spice plantations. There were grapevines also. The smell of spice tingled on the cool evening air. Ahead of them was a solid stone house enclosed by walls, approached across a paved yard. The dogs, raging their heads off, were behind a fence, Dido was thankful to find. A bent, aged man, muttering what might have been either blessings or curses, arrived and led their horses away to an open-fronted stable. A sour-looking elderly woman approached. She seemed a little put out at their arrival, but nevertheless invited them to come indoors. And that is the end of chapter 4.